Today is Friday, May 9th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. There's a new pope, and he's from America. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. Email us your thoughts, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me today to get through the news of the Christ, CBN's Billy Hallowell, Trey Goins-Phillips. A lot to get to today, gentlemen, as always. On the focus story, Disney's going to quite the unexpected place.
So Disney is chasing after the almighty dollar by going over to the Middle East. So we'll get into the details on that and the kind of inconsistency there, too.
It's a little ironical, to say the least, for Disney to be in this particular area that they're going. So looking forward to the details there. On the main thing, Josh Broome joins us to talk about why it's critical for Christians to sound the alarm on the issue of revenge porn. All right, make sure you're going to subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts, including our latest podcast hosted by CBN's Abigail Robertson, Heaven Meets Earth. You can find the links to those podcasts in the description of this podcast episode. With that, we are going to head now to the news in 90 seconds. And Cardinal Robert Prevost has taken the new name now that he's the new Pope. He has taken the name Leo XIV. He's a Chicago-born missionary who spent his career ministering in Peru and took over the Vatican's powerful office of bishops and was elected the first Pope from the United States in the history of the Catholic Church. In his first words as Pope Francis's successor, he said, "Peace be with you." He wore the traditional red cape of the papacy, a cape that Francis wore on his election in 2013. He spoke to the crowd in Italian and Spanish, but not English. The former Pope Francis brought Prevost, 69, to the Vatican in 2023 to serve as the head of the office that vets bishop nominations from around the world, one of the most important jobs in the Catholic Church. And President Trump has announced a major new trade deal with the UK, calling it a full and comprehensive agreement that will strengthen U.S. U.K. ties for years to come. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. Guys, this news, the breaking news yesterday of a new pope being announced happened while I was in the middle of recording another segment with CBN's John Stolnis. And we were just commenting on the tradition of it all. I always love traditions that hang around. It's no matter what it is, it's always kind of cool to see a tradition survive, but it's just a bizarre tradition watching the smoke and everyone's sitting there going, what have they done? What is it going to be? A yay or nay? And then we're all watching a smokestack. It's just kind of an odd thing when you think about it, but interesting at the same time. But here we are, a lot of talk already, people trying to dissect and figure out this new pope.
Yeah, I think here's the deal. Everybody's an armchair expert on every single topic, right? It's like we don't know anything about this guy. We don't know really. I mean, yes, there's information out there, but you can pull one thing. Look, if anybody came on this show and pulled one episode and pulled one thing Dan said, one thing Trey said, one thing I said, and then pretended that was everything we believe about everything and indicative of it, that's a dangerous thing to do. So we just have to withhold judgment and give it a minute. And, before you judge either yay or nay on this individual, that's sort of my philosophy.
Yeah, I think it really is just way too early for us to have any sort of indication about who he's going to be as a pope, right? And it's also, he's stepping into a different role. He's been in the role of cardinal, which obviously that's still a pretty high up position within the Catholic Church, but it's wholly different to step up as the leader of the Catholic Church, globally. So his positions, not that his doctrine is going to change, but the way he talks about things might change some too. So I think it's a wait and see type thing. It is interesting and kind of cool to see the first Catholic Pope coming from the United States. Even Trump, right after his election, the announcement about Prevost, or now Pope Leo, stepping into this role, he said it's an honor to realize that he's the first first American Pope, and said it's exciting and that he's looking forward to meeting the new Pope. He said it's a meaningful moment. So, I think there's some of that that's kind of fascinating to see an American taking on that huge role for the first time.
Yeah, for sure. And he's, like you guys are saying, he's, and the history as far as
he's young too.
Yeah, as far as
he's only 69.
Go. Yeah, trying to lock down his ideologies, and he's a registered Republican apparently in the United States. In some areas, he's going after social justice issues. In some areas, pro-life, and so people don't know yet, and that's, Francis was sort of that way on some things, but we'll see. Obviously, the more important things is where does he land on theology on things. So we'll see where he lands on all of those things as we go. We'll continue to report on that on CBN News and faithwire.com. All right, we're going to head to the focus story now. And, well, Disney, who for years were championing LGBTQ woke ideologies and just being very outspoken about these far left radical ideas, now they're venturing into a new area that seems like quite an interesting move considering that history.
Well, not only the history of, the storylines and angles that they're putting into their shows and movies and kind of pushing that on parents, but the fact that they were so outspoken, and Disney was all up in arms when Bob Chapek was president of Disney at the time, when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law the Don't Say Gay bill, which of course is a misnomer. That's not at all what the bill was about. It was just saying you can't teach little kids about sexuality and gender ideologies and orientation. Shouldn't be that controversial, but it was. Disney chose to be really outspoken about it. They took this moral stand, talked about how terrible it was, and ultimately ended up with, and we talked about this extensively on the podcast at the time, the dismantling of a business agreement, essentially, that Disney, the theme park company had with Florida and the district near Orlando that they're in. So all of that craziness about how terrible this law was in Florida. Meanwhile, they see dollar signs and they're deciding to go ahead and build a theme park in Abu Dhabi where homosexuality is staunchly restricted and very illegal. So people are calling out that hypocrisy there.
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction when I saw it was, I wonder if they're going to have any trans princesses on the Abu Dhabi campus there of Disney, as they did here, right? And people were upset about it. Like, come on, please don't jam this ideology down my throat when we've got our kids here and everything else. And it was a whole thing, but that's the sort of thing that Disney is pushing. And we know that's not going to fly in Abu Dhabi. So what's the law over there on issues like that?
Yeah. So again, in the United States, we obviously, homosexuality, same-sex marriage is legal. There's no restrictions against that happening. There was this bill saying you shouldn't be able to teach little kids about sexual orientation and gender ideology. That was condemned by Disney, and then they're willing to go over to Abu Dhabi and the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, where there are several laws criminalizing same-sex marriage. There's one law under Article 50 of Abu Dhabi's penal code that says, quote, unnatural sex with another person, which is same-sex interactions, is punishable by up to 14 years of imprisonment. They have another article in the UAE federal penal code that similarly prosecutes consensual same-sex acts and can even they can even punish these things under Sharia law. Now, it does not often happen. There's no documented cases in modern recent years of Abu Dhabi actually,
enforcing
somebody
it, right?
the death penalty, right? They're not enforcing that, but it is still the law of the land, right? It's still the law on the books. So if Disney is really that concerned about it, would they be opening up a theme park in Abu Dhabi?
So what do you think? I mean, given this dichotomy that's going on here, right? Given these two seemingly at odds views, Disney having this championing of these sorts of relationships and then trying to venture into an area like this, what kind of message does this send? What do we make of this?
Well, I think at the end of the day, this is just a dollars and cents decision, right? I think it kind of shows that never was Disney really committed to any sort of moral compass, even in 2022 when they condemned Florida and Governor Ron DeSantis for the law there. They saw an opportunity for corporate partnerships with other companies who had taken a similar role. They saw a chance to get widespread, lavish coverage from the media about how incredible they were for taking this great moral stand. And there was money to be had in that instance. And I think now, with the theme park in Abu Dhabi, they see similarly a lot of money on the table and an opportunity to profit from it. So I think always this has been about money, and at the end of the day, it goes back to the almighty dollar. Now, I think the one interesting thing here, though, is when it comes to movies, Disney is willing to lose billions of dollars and continue to put these things in their movies. So that I can't seem to kind of, square that round hole. I don't really understand exactly what the deal is there, but clearly with the theme park thing, this is all about money.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Billy, what's your reaction to this when you see, because we've covered many stories from Disney over the last couple of years on this front, and then we see them make a move like this. How do you make heads or tails of it?
I just wonder how all those people in the undercover videos talking about what they wanted to do through the content are feeling about this development. You have to look at this and you have to scratch your head. You have to laugh, and then you have to say, how sad is this whole thing that people were willing to fight with a governor of a conservative state in America when they would just go and do this in another country where the hypocrisy almost seems painful. But, we're also watching Disney put out statements saying things like, oh, it's a parent's right, to teach their kids the values they want to teach them. So I think they're in the middle of a hard pivot right now. And I think one thing that's probably important to delineate, Disney, we look at it as this one company, but there's the Florida Disney and there's the California Disney. And I would bet there's a lot of infighting that goes on between those different institutions within Disney. So it's almost like, you've got multiple personalities all speaking up, trying to claim the narrative. So who knows? In 5 years, right. Disney could be a Christian company at this point.
Well, I mean, I think, look, it's a massive company. So you're not going to have, no matter how much traction one particular view is getting inside the company, you're never going to have. I mean, we've seen very good, strong Christian testimonies of people that have come out of working at Disney. Now, usually the common theme is we're talking to them after they've left and fled Disney, but they worked there, right? And they were there, so that there are Christians and good Christians in Disney, and pray for them as they try to deal with some of the shenanigans that they've got to deal with. But a lot of this, guys, makes me think that there's so much tribalism going on. Because you can understand as a company why Disney would want to expand into these different areas. Sure. But the outrage that happened, like Trey was saying, over Ron DeSantis, it's like at that point, you're just into tribalism and you're just willing to yell at anything when you're going to make a big stink over that. But it's just mum's the word on these people that are locking up gay people all over the place. In theory, right? They've got these laws that allows you to do that. So where's the outrage there? It's almost like, well, here in America, they're familiar with the politics. They know what side they're on. And it's just this tribalism gets the better of us. And unfortunately, that seems to be the case more and more today, where people are just willing to argue because, you know what, I'm on this team, you're on that team.
Yeah, I think that for sure is part of it. And I think we also have the progressive sensibilities that are factoring in here too, right? We're allowed to go after Christianity because that is the supremacist religion here in the West, or we're allowed to attack that because it needs to be taken down. But Islam and Muslim ideology is like the sacred cow, for lack of a better word. It's like, well, we can't touch that because they're a minority and they need to be respected. So it's just beautiful tradition when they seek to discriminate and persecute people who are of a different sexual orientation, where it's terrible for a Christian to say, I don't think we should be teaching 4-year-olds about sexual orientation.
Right. Yes, those two things. I mean, they're not even close, but yet one elicits the outrage, the other one does not. And so, it just kind of goes to show the state that we're in here in America. But appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today and breaking it down, Trey. And we're going to head to the main thing now. And Trey recently sat down with Josh Broome, who explained a new anti-revenge porn bill heading to President Trump's desk, why it's so critical for Christians to sound the alarm on this issue. That conversation is today's main thing.
There's a new bill heading to President Donald Trump's desk, the Take It Down Act. This is something that you have been advocating for now for half a decade.
Yeah.
Can you give us just a brief rundown of what this law does? Catch us up to speed. And why is it something that you've been so personally passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, so my story of being in the adult film industry kind of plays my hand to, utilize the story in which God has given me to speak into culture in a unique way. And part of that industry is that each person in that industry faces the same thing systematically that one would face regarding trafficking, and that force, fraud, coercion is the basis or the foundation from which that organization functions through. And a big part of that is each person that does that content, they're an independent contractor, and you waive all rights of any kind of intellectual property, anything that was captured that day, video, audio, imagery. And it's not just used for what it was filmed for, it's sold to infinite numbers of third parties. And, while I, upon my own volition, said yes to filming that scene, what I didn't say yes to was being a spokesperson for, performance enhancing products or toys or billboards advocating for this or dating sites. And I think we live in a time where people love reactionary content or to borrow people's content, and intellectual property is somewhat vague in some ways. But what we're seeing is because of the utilization of AI, innocent people are having images that they put on public platforms, and it's being obstructed or manipulated in a way that is being sexualized. And not only sexualized, it's being monetized. So, I mean, that is like the big kicker. So, I mean, Ellie, a 15-year-old girl that was completely innocent, who just posted a picture of her at the beach in a sundress that completely covered her body. A few students at her school manipulated that picture, utilizing free AI technology, and shared nudes of her all over AI. Was that her? No. But it certainly looked like her, and it was so realistic that people believed that it was her. And she and her family started fighting this, and this is kind of where that fight started. But the Take It Down Act is saying, hey, you'll be held legally responsible if you do this, and sites that don't have clear consent, sites that don't have clear consent, if you don't have that from each and every person that's involved in that imagery, they are demanded to take that down, or they will face legal ramifications.
So from a biblical standpoint, obviously we should all know why this is important, but as
Sure.
Christians, why is it critical that we address this issue? Not only the revenge pornography side of it, but as you said, because of artificial intelligence, some of this stuff can be created that is completely artificial. It never actually happened. There's deep fake exploitation happening too. So talk about, from a Christian perspective, why it's critical for us to be vigilant and hyperactive in combating this evil stuff happening.
Yeah, because I mean, I think it's multifaceted in that, because you have the person that is completely innocent, and they are, they get their image taken and manipulated, and they had no part to play in this. But then you have the other person, for example, like my friend Victoria. She was dating someone. She went to Vegas upon her own volition, but then she was drugged, and she ended up having sex with this person. But that sex was filmed, and not only was that sex filmed, that content then ended up on a porn website, and that scene got broken up into many parts, and that it got eventually monetized. She had no idea it was on there. It was on there for years. And then when she found out that it was, because someone sent it to her, all of a sudden it started to fluctuate, and she lost her job, and she was really struggling with her mental health. So either the person that was completely innocent, or the person that they had put themselves in a situation that would not be optimal, but they didn't give the consent for their imagery or that video to be used in that way. I think we live in this culture that is narrated by pornography that over-sexualizes our culture. So to the same person that would say, this college student that was sexually assaulted, that wouldn't have happened if they wouldn't have been dressed that way. That thinking doesn't come from a heart that is surrendered and submitted to the person of Jesus. What's true is, the heart of that person that assaulted that girl, that is the problem. It's not how she's dressed. It's not, we can have a different conversation regarding modesty, but that person was innocent. So I would say just to factor in the whole mentality of cancel culture, where we're seeing things pop up that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it just, it removes everything that was good that was done over that period. So I think it's just this weird, gray area where we don't know how to operate. But again, as followers of Jesus, we want to protect the innocent. I would say that's where men need to step up in our culture. Why does policy matter? Because people matter.
All right, appreciate that conversation there, and you can catch that entire episode and that conversation with Josh Broome. Always enjoy when we have Josh Broome on, his powerful perspective. You can check that out on the CBN News YouTube channel. Look for the latest episode of Faith versus Culture. Check that out. All right, that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
We've got Matthew 6:22-23. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? When we talk about Disney or any company, whatever we're watching and taking in, it truly, truly matters. Our eyes are the lamp of the body.
Yeah, for sure. And even that conversation with Josh about pornography, right? What we take in is going to come out one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's amazing how many truths originate from the Bible. I mean, it's essentially you are what you eat. I mean, that is essentially what it is. These common things we hear in America have their root in Scripture. Powerful truths from the Word of God. All right. That's where we're going to leave it this week on the Quick Start Podcast. Make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back Monday with more. God bless. Have a fantastic weekend.